All right, hello everybody. Welcome back to the Smogon YouTube. Today we're going to be doing a little bit more of our SPL coverage series. I am Ming549, and today I'm joined by.
Hey, I'm Star, tournament player, been around for a little while, also managing in this SPL, so excited to get into it.
Yeah, and today we're actually going to look at one of your players' games, actually, Attribute versus DugZa. Attribute, I think this is his second SPL. Actually, well, you know him better than me, so I'll just let you talk a little bit about him.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, this is his second SPL. He's actually one of our retains this year. He was also on the Sharks last year. He played SSOU then. He had a decent tour, went like 5-4 there. And then he had his kind of breakout tour in SCL, where he went 7-2 in SV. And now he's back again playing SV for us here.
Yeah, and opposite him we have DugZa, 4-0 and World Cups, former manager of the Smogon Champions League last year, as well as the semifinalist for the most recent iteration of Smogon Masters, as well as last year's edition of OST. So, yeah, that's a little bit about the players. Star, what do you think about this matchup? Kind of right off the bat, we're here at Team Preview. Two kind of similar-ish teams. A little bit of hazard stacking shenanigans we got on both sides, but what do you kind of look at this matchup off with?
Yeah, for sure. They have the hazards on both sides with those nice Tinglus that everyone loves these days. I think Attribute's team is a good amount more offensive, though. Like, you can see he basically has 6 threats, like Glamora and, Dragapult, Roaring Moon, King Gambit, all, really strong Pokemon. DugZa has a bit more of a defensive core, I would say. Like, Moltres is obviously, Flame Body, Will-O-Wisp, all that fun stuff. Pecharunt also, clicks Malignant Chain and spreads poison everywhere. Tinkaton also a somewhat defensive Pokemon along with Tinglu, so I'd say that's more of a balanced kind of team with some big breakers in Ogerpon especially and Dragapult. And Attribute, I'd say, still has a little bit of a defensive core, obviously, with Zapdos, Tinklu, but definitely a more offensive spin there.
Yeah, for sure. For leads, what are you thinking kind of from both sides? Who do you think is we're going to be seeing first?
Yeah, I'd say one thing you see, all the time is people like to get their hazards up early, right? So you look at, there's a Tinkaton, there's a Glamora, there's 2 Tinglus. Maybe these things come out, but you also have to be very afraid of, what can scare these things out, right? And for Attribute, he's staring down an Ogerpon on the other side, which with Ivy Cudgel can kind of nuke Glamora and Tinglu. And if you take 70% or 100% of your Glamora from a Cudgel turn 1, that's going to be pretty awful for you, right? And he also doesn't have great switch-ins. Like Zapdos can switch in a bit, but it's not exactly a hard counter. Dragapult resists water, but it can just die to knock off or play rough, which is very scary. Same with Roaring Moon. So he has to be very careful of this Ogerpon, and therefore, he might be afraid to lead his hazard Pokemon. DugZa, he doesn't necessarily have the same fears because Attribute doesn't have Pokemon that completely kill a Tinglu or Tinkaton. I mean, his own Tinglu is pretty good against Tinkaton, but yeah, I'd say DugZa has less fear than Attribute does going into this. So I think we might see, I know what we're going to see, but Attribute is going to basically be a little afraid of that Ogerpon, and DugZa has more freedom.
Absolutely, and let's just jump right into it. So, with our nice snazzy little SPL background, and we are on very slow. So we see Dragapult come out for Attribute, and then on DugZa's side, we see the Tinkaton come out. Kind of like what you said, right? DugZa just getting his hazard guy out early, and I'm actually going to turn this to regular slow. So this is maybe a little egregiously slow. But yeah. We see a U-turn come out. There we go.
Yeah, so
and then into Tinglu.
Right. Yeah, so Dragapult wants to be safe here. Obviously, he doesn't want to take a Thunder Wave, Play Rough, Knock Off, whatever from Tinkaton. Clicks the safest move in U-turn. We can pause it here for a little sec, I think. So basically, yeah, that first couple turns you see Dragapult U-turn on Tinkaton. Tinkaton obviously takes the chance to get a free knockoff. Since that hits everything, it's always a great move to click. He's not afraid of Glamora coming in, and putting up T-Spikes because he has a Petrant to absorb those also. So yeah, knockoff is just, one of the best moves in Pokemon. He gets rid of this Tinglu's helmet here, which is great. Just makes things easier for everybody. And then after that, Tinglu, because it forces out Tinkaton, Earthquake does a lot to it. It takes its turn to get up a free layer of spikes. And now the big threat comes in Ogerpon. And this is what Attribute's most afraid of. And yeah, he goes to Zapdos because that's his best switch in. And we should probably pause here because this crit is huge.
Yeah, massive.
Yeah, so with this massive crit, his best switch in just got completely crippled. If he gets the same roll, he dies to the next Ivy Cudgel. He doesn't have great switch ins to Ogerpon, like we mentioned earlier. He has 2 water resists in Roaring Moon, Dragapult, but Roaring Moon, that usually runs booster energy. You don't want to waste it immediately. You can also just die if he clicks Play Rough. Same with Dragapult, you can just die if he clicks Knock Off or Play Rough. And Ivy Cudgel still does a lot. From DugZa's position, this is obviously amazing for him. His safe move is obviously, just click Cudgel again, because it would kill the Zapdos most likely. Still does a good chunk to anything else. He could take a risk and kind of maybe even kind of win the game on the spot if he kills the Dragapult here or kills a Roaring Moon here. But if he clicks Play Rough or Knock Off into a Zapdos staying, that could be really, really awful for him, right? Because this Ogerpon is a huge threat. If you get staticked here, or you just die to a Hurricane, or even worse, if you get staticked and then the Zapdos heals, then you've made no progress and you've lost your best breaker. So it's also not a completely free turn for him to press the momentum, but obviously much better for him here than this for Attribute. And I think what we'll see on this next turn is DugZa makes the safe play, clicks Cudgel again as Attribute goes into this Dragapult. Another safe U-turn here from Attribute, but unfortunately gets flame-bodied, which sucks for him.
And Burn Body does what Burn Body does best: burn stuff. But yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, we go here. Tinkaton comes in, and Glimmora does its good old Stealth Rock. So obviously, Moltres has to be afraid of a lot of things there. Meteor Beam, Power Gem, and Moltres usually can't hit Glimmora. Sometimes it runs Scorching Sands, but that's pretty uncommon, and obviously he's not going to risk the Moltres immediately, so we see the safe Tinkaton. Comes in and clicks Stealth Rock, which obviously makes sense, and wants to get those hazards up, and Glimmora makes a sort of aggressive stay to Earth Power, but also makes a lot of sense there. And then Zapdos comes in, it's kind of the best switch into Gigaton Hammer. Tinglu could have also come in, but Zapdos is a better play because he needs to heal the Zapdos for the rest of the team, right? Because Ogerpon is a huge threat. So yeah, he does that here on the knockoff. Does not get a static, which would have been great for him, because now this Tinkaton is going to encore the Zapdos into Roost, and it's locked into Roost, which is not great. DugZa is going to try to press his momentum off that encore. Here comes the Tinglu. And we see Kingambit come in. So, okay, I'd say this is a big turn because, Attribute obviously switches in Kingambit because it's a good switch to Tinkaton. It revealed that it's not Thunder Wave, it's Gigaton knockoff Encore. So, yeah, the worst that can happen is Kingambit gets knocked off. Yeah, safe switch in. DugZa goes to Tinglu because I guess he wants to get more hazards and things like that on the free turns. And here, DugZa has a very good switch in, the Kingambit in Moltres, but he decides to stay in. I would say this was probably the first mistake of the game for DugZa, because Tinglu is obviously very useful into Zapdos, Glimmora, Dragapult, kind of everything. Moltres, is obviously it's just an amazing Kingambit switch in. This Kingambit also revealed that it's leftovers, so it's not Lomberry or anything like that. Flame Body would basically just kill it. So here Attribute gets really good value out of his Kingambit, I think, with getting 51% off on that Tinglu. Maybe DugZa also didn't think it had low kick. But yeah, I'd say this turn is a very good trade for Attribute.
How common is that, would you say? Because I know Kingambit has a lot of options he can kind of run, both in his sets and his moves. How common would you say low kick is, and is that something that like DugZa should be super scared of in this matchup specifically?
I mean, I wouldn't say he should be scared of it in this matchup, given he has a Moltres and everything. But I'd say it's not a super common move, but you do see it pretty often because obviously it's great into other King Gambit, which is one of the biggest threats in this tier. And yeah, I mean King Gambit has a variety of sets. It can just be the normal like stab moves, or it can be Terra Blast, or it can be low kick. But yeah, here we see low kick because I guess Attribute's team, it's not amazing into other King Gambit. You can revenge it obviously, but yeah, I mean, the better you can be with all your mons and to not allow it to set up is ideal. So that's why he has low kick here. And yeah, he's able to get a great trade with 51% off that Tinglu.
All right.
So yeah, here we see that Zapdos come out because Attribute is afraid of clicking low kick again into Moltres, just getting burned, and then you have another useless Pokemon. And DugZa just clicks Earthquake because that's the safest play because Attribute is most likely going to switch, and if he doesn't switch, then I mean it's still okay. And Earthquake there lets him stay in with Tinglu, lets him get a spike here on this Hurricane. And Attribute hits a couple Hurricanes, takes this Tinglu out. And here comes Petulant. So this was an interesting turn. I did not expect this play here from Attribute, going Dragapult, because it takes this Hazard, takes this Burn, takes this Malignant Chain. It goes all the way down to like 9% after this Burn. Yeah, I didn't expect this because I thought he would want to keep this Dragapult, especially now that Tinglu has just died. There's no more Ghost Resist, so Shadow Ball is a huge threat, right? Because this is most likely a Specs Dragapult when it's not Boots, and yeah, it had no attack on that U-turn, so Shadow Ball is obviously a big threat. Tinkaton is also going to die in Shadow Ball. He has no real resist, but this Dragapult does come in. I was thinking he might have gone Glamora or something, but here's where Attribute makes a great play and clicks Thunderbolt. I honestly didn't really expect that, but it worked out very well. I think because, he was thinking DugZa wants to save that Tinkaton sack because keeping that alive to block Mortal Spin from Glamora is pretty huge to keep those hazards up. And yeah, it's always not to keep a sack. And this Moltres, it seems, had enough special defense to live 2 Shadow Balls, so it would have been able to roost things off. But Attribute has an uncommon move here in T-Bolt that ends up paying off really, really well because this Moltres is, like we mentioned before, it's a great switch into King Gambit. It's a great, it can Flame Body Roaring Moon. It's very, very annoying for Attribute, and getting 70% on this is massive for him. So here, yeah, safe play with another Thunderbolt into Dragapult. But, Attribute's Dragapult was obviously going to die in this turn. He decides to just get one more attack off instead of, trying to predict the switch and double, because honestly he doesn't really have much of anything to double to. Here is a huge turn for DugZa. He decides to blow his Terra to kill this Glamora, because on this turn, what is Attribute threatening, right? He's threatening Mortal Spin, which would take hazards off and make the game much harder for DugZa, because his Tinglu is dead, can't get those spikes back up. His Tinkaton is going to be at like 10% after hazards. Can't really, maybe he can get Stealth Rock back, but his Tinkaton is going to die for it, and it's not a great thing for him. Obviously, DugZa could have maybe gone Tinkaton on a Mortal Spin. Attribute could have predicted that, clicked Earth Power. There's a lot of things that could happen on this turn, but DugZa decides to take kind of his most guaranteed option, which is click Terra Dragon Draco Meteor, which is going to kill Glamora very easily, and kind of put him in the driver's seat, where he keeps hazards, he keeps all the pressure, and he keeps all his Pokemon. So yeah, he decides to expend his Terra, which is obviously, a big choice, but works out pretty well for him, I think. Attribute, by the way, you notice is down to 5 seconds. He has to think a lot after that turn. Brings out this Roaring Moon, because... Well, we can talk about why he brought out Roaring Moon in the first place, right? If you look at his team against Dragapult, Zapdos coming in after Stealth Rock, not a great switch in. King Gambit is at like 10%, not a great switch in. Tinglu's not going to do anything except get burned, not a great switch in. So he's really out of options. He goes into this Roaring Moon, Roaring Moon would just die to Draco Meteor if he had clicked it here on this non-Terra turn, but DugZa is obviously very right to be afraid of a Terra. If you Draco Meteor into Terra Dragon, or sorry, into Terra Fairy, give off a free Dragon Dance, or Draco Meteor into some other Terra that just is not weak to Dragon. Giving a free Dragon Dance, Roaring Moon might just sweep on the spot because everything's pretty chipped. Your Terra's been used, so he clicks the best play, which is Will-O-Wisp, and he burns this Roaring Moon. And here's another big turn where, Attribute is able to kill this Dragapult. DugZa maybe could have saved this because, Dragapult with Terra Dragon basically kills everything with Draco Meteor, right? So if he had tried, if he sacked Tinkaton here, that could have been pretty cool for him, and he would have kept his Pokemon alive. But he decides to make the safe play. What if he DDs again, right, on the switch? Then he might just lose on the spot. So sacking Dragapult was the safest play for him, so it made a lot of sense. And here comes the Pecharunt. This should live a knockoff. It even lives a critical hit knockoff, which is a little crazy. This thing is so fat, but yeah. Lives this, is able to get the Malignant Chain off. Oh no, it clicks Parting Shot, which is interesting. I guess that makes sense because it would have lived Malignant Chain, and here he gets to Parting Shot. He keeps the Pecharunt sack, but that crit is very nice for Attribute because now it dies to hazards.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too because, well, obviously without the crit, the Pecharunt is, more than likely above hazards range. You could come in and maybe still save it for the sack, as you still can. You have the body, you can stack it. But why do you think there was like perhaps any other reason that he wouldn't have tried going maybe like Ogerpon Heart or like Moltres or some other thing? Do you think that he had to get that Parting Shot off, or was everything else kind of at risk at dying to some coverage? Because he still does have the Moltres, right?
Yeah, he does have the Moltres. I think he probably didn't have like any move to kill this thing quickly on Moltres. Like, I don't know, maybe if he had Roar on Moltres, maybe you could argue he could have gone to it, but maybe he was afraid, like, rocks are up, right? If Moltres gets knocked, clicks Roar, then it's very low. Kingambit is a threat to just win, right? Because it's still like even at low HP, it pretty much still walls Pecharunt. It kills Tinkaton at with 5 Fallen, or like with the Swords Dance, it might just kill Ogerpon. So it would have been a very big threat if this Moltres gets too low, dies to rocks, and he has nothing for Kingambit. So, and also, if you go hard to Ogerpon, he might not have had a move that could just kill this. Like, he might not have Play Rough. So he would have thought, if I just go Ogerpon and if I only have U-turn, let's say, right? If I take this Acrobatics before Parting Shot and then click U-turn, my Ogerpon is going to die to hazards. I'll take over 50%, then I U-turn out, and my Ogerpon is below 25%, can't come in ever again. And that's also a huge loss for him because that's his main kind of threat to kill the rest of the team, right? So I think this was a very calculated play to click that Parting Shot. I think he gets a little unlucky here with that crit, which makes Pecharunt, unable to do anything again other than just die to hazards. So yeah, I think it was a pretty calculated play, and he's able to get this Ogerpon in, and yeah, just take this knockoff, still be able to live hazards, and kill this Roaring Moon with U-turn. Here Tinkaton comes in, which makes a lot of sense because it's faster than everything. It can't get in too bad a spot here. Clicks Gigaton, which is smart. It's a non-contact move. You can't get staticked. And Zapdos takes a turn to heal, and obviously the Encore is coming out here. Azarus is clicked again. And here the Tinglu comes out on what's basically just a free attack for DugZa. Yep, and yeah, Gigaton does a healthy chunk. And now, he can't click it again, so he clicks Knockoff, and Earthquake takes care of this Gigaton. So here's an interesting turn, I'd say. So, like, DugZa decides that rather than going Ogerpon, I'm going to go Moltres, which makes a lot of sense, because that Ogerpon, if it doesn't have Synthesis, can only come in one more time to hazards, right? If you come in here, you can kill the Tinglu, but then Kingambit comes in, forces you, it can just kill you with Sucker Punch, and then Zapdos is going to beat Moltres, right? Because Pecharunt dies to hazards. So he can't go to Ogerpon and just get this kill. He has to go to this Moltres and try to get this healed up.
And before, when I mentioned the Moltres thing, I definitely forgot that this ate a Thunderbolt from that Dragapult. So it definitely could not have switched into the Roaring Moon. It would have just gotten exploded by knockoff.
Yeah.
Yeah, another reason why that Thunderbolt was huge. That Thunderbolt turn that we mentioned before, just putting Moltres in range of even a burnt Roaring Moon, albeit with its booster and still at +1, so still hitting like a truck. But yeah, moving on. You see the burn.
Yep. So Taunt is pretty uncommon on Tinglu, but ends up being very, very nice for him here because normally Tinglu, doesn't have any way to kill Moltres from 28% and like can't really do much to it. So, Will-O-Wisp or Roost would have been very annoying, but Taunt cuts off his ability to Roost, which is great. And after that, if you Roost on Earthquake, you're not really going to be healing all that much. DugZa decides, I need to Roost, so he decides to sack this Pecharunt instead to get that Roost off. And Attribute takes that free turn to nicely set up a layer of spikes, which is not that relevant, but, might as well. And here we do see that Roost come off, and Attribute is able to just click Taunt again, because it's, his best click, pretty free move. And here he has Ruination, so he's able to click that, and as this Tinglu dies, he gets a nice 40% on that Moltres, which is huge for him, because it puts it in a range of all these attacks, like King Gambit's attacks and Zapdos' attacks. And here I want to pause for a minute, because we're getting into like the nitty-gritty bits of the endgame. And I think, this is where a lot of tournament players that I've seen over the years struggle. It's so easy to choke endgames. Everybody does it. It's difficult to figure out, how do I really 100% an endgame, right? Make sure that, there's no possible way I can get unlucky. Because a lot of the times you see players just make slight mistakes, and they're still very advantaged, right? But they bring it to a chance where they can lose to, one crit on the one turn, or one miss on the one turn on a 90% move or something, when they could have had a 100% win. And this is, I think, what separates the best players from the good players, is the ability to really close out those games in 100% fashion. No matter what move they click, no matter what set they have, I'm gonna win this game. I'm not gonna leave it up to chance. And Attribute does a great play here, where he goes to King Gambit on this taunted Moltres. So he knows that this Moltres, it's taunted. It can't Roost. So it can only, it can click Flamethrower, or it has to switch, right? And so you might be tempted when you send out this King Gambit to say, well, it has to attack, right? So why can't I just click Sucker Punch? Because that'll kill this Moltres. But if you do click Sucker Punch, and this Moltres attacks, let's say that happens, right? You might get Flame Body. And now this Ogerpon comes in. It's going to be very low. It can't kill Zapdos. But if you get burned, and this Ogerpon has Synthesis, it can just heal off, get into a range where it can easily kind of just get lucky against Zapdos, right? Like a Hurricane Miss, Ivy Cudgel crit, whatever. Those kinds of odds can be very bad for you. And also just the opportunity of, what if he preserves this Moltres? What if he goes hard Ogerpon on Sucker Punch, and then he clicks Encore, he clicks Synthesis. He hasn't revealed any of these moves, right? But these are all possibilities where you could get into a bad position where, your one game is no longer looking so won. So what he did here is a really great play of two things. Both, one, going King Gambit instead of going Zapdos. Because, one, if you went Zapdos, you would take Stealth Rock, right? Because you've been knocked off. You would be at, I think 76% after Stealth Rock, 75%. If you click your move to kill Moltres that actually hits is Volt Switch, right? And that's something you could do. You could Volt Switch into King Gambit, and then have King Gambit and Zapdos against Ogerpon. And you have very, very good odds to win from there. Because the only way you can lose is if, Ogerpon is able to kill King Gambit, gets the turn right with Sucker versus Kowtow, whatever. And then it crits Cudgel against Zapdos, kills it from 50%. Because it's not going to kill without crit from there. But, that Cudgel's a high crit move. You could still lose if you get that King Gambit turn wrong, and then you get a little unlucky with Zapdos. So going King Gambit here, and then deciding, I'm not going to Sucker Punch, I'm going to click Kowtow, is, it's the only way to actually fully 100% this game, and that's why Attribute does a really great job with that. So now the Zapdos comes in. Volt Switch is going to take care of this Moltres. Ogerpon comes in. Zapdos is no longer in range of an Ivy Culture crit. It's like completely safe here. Only way you could ever lose is like if Ogerpon is Synthesis and like dodges a million moves and whatnot. But yeah, we see it's not Synthesis, just dies to this Volt Switch, and Attribute is able to close out that game.
Yeah, and great work from Attribute too. A little bit about the context of kind of this match. You can correct me if I'm mistaken, but I'm pretty sure this was the game to secure the tie for the week for Attribute's team.
I think we were. I think the score was something like 5-5 at this point, I believe. And yeah, this was the game to see who gets 6.
Yeah. So obviously, somewhat big stakes for Attribute. Securing at least the tie for the week. And just a really well played game from him overall. That Dragapult turn, like really to me, that was kind of like the turn of the game. It's like, Moltres is coming in. You have that like kind of secret sauce technology on your Dragapult that you really don't see very often. Generally, on like even the Specs Pult builds, you'll see the dual stabs, you'll see like U-turn, and then it's generally fire coverage last, right? So, electric coverage is really kind of neat, and it paid off huge dividends here. Who can say if Moltres was like the intended target for that? But I kind of am struggling to think about other, maybe like History Samurai.
Only weak to electric, so.
Yeah. So yeah, fabulous stuff from both Attribute and DugZa. Both of them played a very good game. Even DugZa, right? When you were walking through that whole like end game sequence of playing to your outs, I think DugZa was also playing to his outs. Kind of if, let's say the King Gambit like sucker punched that turn and got burnt, and the Ogerpon had like Synthesis or Encore or something, then suddenly it's still a game for him. So, he's definitely playing some high level play from both sides, and Attribute just managed to kind of edge ahead in this one too. So, yeah, cool stuff. Also, if I'm mistaken, did Attribute use Terra this game at all? I feel like he didn't, right?
He did not. I think probably what he could have done was like Terra the Roaring Moon. Like, I mean, I don't think he had a particularly use for Terra, but yeah, I mean, I think there was just never really a situation where he was going to gain a lot from clicking a Terra in this game. So yeah, it ended up being one of those weird games where you never actually end up Terraing. I think he was just trying to save it for where is it most useful, but the time just kind of never came, which is rare, but you do it sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well. Do you have kind of any closing comments about the game?
Not really. I think it was a well-played game from both sides. I don't think like either of them really, egregious plays or anything like that. I think they both played smartly to their outs. Obviously, some little bit of luck on both sides with various flame bodies and static. I mean, all those kinds of nonsense that we see. But yeah, ended up being a very close game, very interesting game, and yeah, a good win for my team. But yeah.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well. Star, thank you for joining us tonight and walking us through this game, providing your expert insight into kind of some of the nuances from both players. We'll look forward to having you on the channel later. And to all our viewers, thank you again for taking the time out of your busy days to sit down and watch us. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, do all that fantastic stuff. Check us out on Twitch, where we will be streaming every weekend during Smogon Game Day. And we will catch you next time. Peace.